Okay, so Ryan, so you brought the word today on enjoying the journey. This is our second week in the Choices series, which is a combination of Proverbs and the fruit of the Spirit.
Yep.
And you always bring such a great word, but with humor, and it gets stuck. We had last week a card that we gave out, and this week we have a new one. You can get these too if you're watching. You can get these on line on our app. You can just use the PDF, same as. But we gave these out, and last week our challenge for the week was love wisdom was a theme, and our challenge was find a trusted advisor and someone you admire and ask them like, what is the greatest piece of advice that you've ever been given? So I am going to put you on the spot 100%. And ask you, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
This is my favorite question because the best piece of advice I've ever been given was by Rick Warren. I sat with Rick Warren for about 3 hours and we're just shooting the breeze. We're just chatting. And my last question to him was, hey, what do you see? Like, just speak wisdom into my life. Like, you've heard me talk. You've kind of gotten to know me a little bit. Like, tell me.
That's an opportunity right there.
Oh, yeah. And he says, your career will be fine. He said, a guy like you, he goes, you'll figure it out. He goes, you'll be just fine. He said, but your family will not take care of itself. And he said, your family cannot compete with standing ovations.
Wow.
And he said, you have a life right now where you are consistently flown first class. You're put in the best hotels. You get steak dinners. And he said, how is your family supposed to compete with that when you come home?
Wow.
They're supposed to have signs for you, fog, lights.
Yeah.
And so he said, hey, what I encourage guys like you to do is when you get home, make sure you mow your own lawn.
Wow.
We have turf in our backyard, so I can't do that. But I mop my own floor.
Wow.
We've never had a cleaning lady.
Okay.
I'm the cleaning lady.
Okay.
So I could get home 10 p.m. And my mop game is next level. It's got like a LCD.
Oh, you got the best of it.
Oh yeah, I don't mess around. Like, but it's
you're not wringing it by hand.
No. Like it is next level, but it's.
But you're doing it.
Yeah, but when my wife or friends are like, "Why are you always cleaning?" I'm like, "I'm coming home."
Yeah.
Like it is.
Yeah.
You are normalizing yourself because the adrenaline from people clapping for you.
Yeah.
Something Rick said was, he said, we weren't made for worship.
No.
He said, so people that do what we do have to have something in their life that is toilet cleaning.
Yes.
That brings you back down to just a dad.
Yes.
Yeah,
because it's destructive. Worship for humans
100%.
is destructive.
100%.
And it's like you need to be grounded, which is a beautiful picture, that advice he gave you with the fruit of the Spirit, because you can't produce fruit if you can't, your feet never touch the ground. You don't have any roots.
Yeah.
This last week, I was shopping. I did grocery shopping. I did like laundry.
Yeah.
I really cleaned my house. And I do have someone that helps clean my house.
Sure.
But I like doing the extra special stuff or changing seasonally things. And I remember thinking that day, I need a day every week where I can just be a wife and a mother and a grandmother.
Yeah.
It's so fulfilling. It's not a chore because it's what really lasts. And that's why that advice is so powerful because it puts your perspective back on this is what remains. And Jesus said, I want you to bear fruit and fruit that remains. Not this doesn't last.
No.
We know that.
Oh, yeah.
Because in the world we're in, even as as communicators in the kingdom, you can say one thing and it can be wrong, but it could also just be taken out of context and edited incorrectly. And you get thrown out with yesterday's trash. So your family is the greatest mission field you're called to. I love that. And now he didn't just, it's like, you spent some time, a couple hours with Rick Warren, but now we're spending time with you. So it's like we got to ask him that same advice. What's the best advice? And you get to be a microphone for that. I love that. When people ask me that, I kind of freeze up because I'm like, which subject? You know?
Sure.
But the main thing was, what to me was with kids. Like, you're going to wish your life away. Don't do that because you'll, when you get all the things you think you're working for, you're going to look back and go, Oh my goodness, what I wouldn't give for Legos on the floor again.
Oh, yeah.
And 100%. Kids that look up to you and, drinking every word.
Yeah.
So that's some good advice.
Yeah.
And we've had some people ask this week. I actually got some DMs. What's the best advice you've ever given? So I'm going to tell them to watch this so that they can get it from you.
That's awesome.
So this week and this message, Enjoying the Journey, our Proverbs 16:20 is our subject and our scripture for the week. Those who listen to instruction will prosper, and those who trust the Lord will be joyful.
Yeah.
So it makes a connection for us between trust and joy.
Yeah.
So our challenge for the week is for people to look at their life and go, okay, what areas of my life do I experience the most fear? Because fear and joy cannot coexist in the same space.
Yeah.
So how many of us, like you described today, have ruined things because our focus becomes all about the imperfection of the moment? And I think some people are born happy, like you talked about, and some people are not.
Yeah.
So what would be your greatest advice as we kind of dig into what am I most overly concerned about, or what am I overthinking right now that's stealing my joy? Yeah. What would you say to people when they kind of are nearing a neighborhood that they know is not good here or here? How do they make a 180? How do they peel out of that neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important that we write things down. It's interesting. In our head, things are massive. But when you write it down, you're like,
it's not that big a deal.
It's just
that's so true.
This happens with debt.
Yes.
When people they feel debt, it's so heavy. Like, write it down.
Yeah.
Okay, what would it take for you to lower that number this month?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I can do something about this thing that is I'm so afraid of.
Yeah.
And I could start looking at my finances differently. Sometimes we just feel like our habits are overwhelming.
Yes.
But once you write something down, it's amazing when you just look at it.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away.
Right.
But it does get smaller. So,
it does. The monster isn't as big as you thought it was.
Yeah.
That's really great practical advice. Because I think, I talked about this last week too, is I think a lot of people, when they come to you and they feel like their life is falling apart and they're overwhelmed, they want a really complicated solution. And they almost feel like you've insulted them when you give them something really practical to do. Because they're like, the iceberg is this big. And you're like, but when you write it down though, you're going to see that it's actually not as bad.
Yeah.
I think that's a great piece of advice. So today, when you brought the message, I love the part when you were talking about people naturally tending toward joy. And you were telling us about your boys when you picked them up today.
Yeah.
How they're very opposite.
Very.
So how are you going to, like you said, Jackson, he comes out of children's church this morning, he's crying. And Roman's licking his popsicle hey, everybody, just born happy.
Yeah.
So if you are one of the people like Jackson that are just not born happy,
sure.
What and even how you're going to raise your son, how are you going to steer him toward a joyful journey?
Yeah.
Just in knowing that that's really close to home for you.
Yeah, very close to home. And me and Jackson have a lot of conversations about this.
And he's what? How old is he?
He's 9.
9. Okay.
He's 9. One, I always tell him, hey, let's look for happy. So Jackson, obviously at 9, if one bad thing happens, he feels like he had a bad day.
Yes.
I say, hey, you had a bad moment. Yeah. But there's still so much time left in the day that we could actually thoroughly enjoy if we choose to. The other thing that I often have to tell Jackson is he will come into the house and tell us about his horrible day. And he is overwhelmed by it. And he'll continue that. Sometimes for hours.
Yeah.
And what I've been teaching him lately is I'll say, hey, what kind of day did your dad have? I don't know. What kind of day did your mom have?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Well, what kind of day did your brother have? Well, I don't know. You don't know because you didn't ask.
Yeah.
Hey, I get that you had a bad day, but it doesn't mean all of us have to have a bad day. And I said, something powerful happens when you begin to get considerate about other people in their day. And so sometimes I'll actually see him, and I'm so proud of him for this. He'll come in the house, he'll go, hey, Dad, how was your day? His mood changed by being considerate of somebody else's.
Yes.
And I'll say, well, Daddy had a long day. They had a lot of work to do. They had a lot of research, a lot of writing. But my day just got better because you got here.
Oh.
How's your day? And they'll be like, well, man, that was a pretty good day. Like, it's amazing what can happen. Proverbs 11:25 is actually my favorite proverb. It says, he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. It makes absolutely no sense, but it's such a God thing.
Yeah.
When you start encouraging other people, when you start being considerate of other people, somehow, some way, I don't know how it works, your tank gets full.
Yeah.
And so there have been times where I have been on empty on that stage.
Yeah.
And I got off that stage full. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
But it's a God thing. I think when you refresh others, you yourself get refreshed.
You know, the picture I always have with that verse is like someone going to retrieve water from a well. And they're bringing it back for everybody else, but they're also getting it and they get the source, you know? And I feel like that's happened with me a lot too. What in this message, like enjoying the journey, has spoken to you the most? Because I told the North Campus where I spoke today that I need this word because I'm a perfectionist and my husband has to remind me constantly to not ruin a moment, like because it doesn't live up to the expectation. Because I've had to identify what am I afraid of in this moment that's causing me to not enjoy. Am I afraid of dropping a ball? Am I afraid of somebody's impression of this moment? Am I afraid I'm not going to be prepared or that I'm going to run out of gas? Because that verse in Proverbs speaks to me because I feel like when you know you have to refresh others, you a lot of times steal from your personal bank. But the Holy Spirit always makes it up to you when it's like, okay, God, I know this isn't about me, but this is my sacrifice today. So I told the North Campus, like, I need this word. So I got to go listen to Pastor Ryan's word on enjoying the journey to see what he really got out of it. So how did this message preach to you personally?
I think for me, I'm constantly in a world where people are asking me what's next.
Yeah. For you?
For me.
Okay.
What's the next book? What's the next project? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
What's the next mountain to climb that I can fall for the temptation not to enjoy what's now?
Right.
Give my best to what's now, that I get so forward thinking that I'm like overwhelmed with the future and worried about the future.
I think that sounds like your book. That's your next book right now is now instead of next.
Yeah, it's like
contentment.
Yeah, there's just a. And so I've had some boring conversations over the last 6 months because they'll be like, so what's the next 5 years look like for you? I don't know what the next 5 weeks looks like for me. But, you know, God's given us a lot, more than we deserve. Enjoy it and give my best to it.
I think, you know, I've had kind of a backseat to what God's done in your life to get to watch and to know as I prayed with you and Amanda in seasons of transition. And I remember the word that God gave me for you that was so specific and it was being rooted in the church and fruited in the world. I still see that. And now you're walking in it. What's amazing about that too is that people would probably look at you and think that all the success you've had is like strategy. And what I've seen is this dude walks by faith. That's what I've seen. Yeah. Every single step has been faithful with what God gives you. Yeah. I mean, not just second mile, but 10th mile faithful. Yeah. I mean, that's what I so love and appreciate you for in your leadership here at Covenant is that you have all these other opportunities, but you're contacting me about when you know you have to speak a month in advance. You're like, okay, this is what I'm working on. This is what God's saying to me. What do you think? And I'm like, I'm still working on the message for this Sunday. And you're so diligent and so faithful. It's not really about your strategy as much as you could do that. You have the intellect to be able to, the perspective to put out this whole life plan, but you haven't. You've really yielded. Yeah. And trust, I think, it's a mark on your life of the joy that you walk in because there is no, like I talked about at North Campus, trust has to have evidence. As Christians, we love to say we trust God, but what's your life look like? Is there really evidence of trust? Because if there's no joy, there's no evidence. Yeah. Joy is the evidence that you trust God because that means you are not beating yourself up or somebody else up over the fact that this moment is not meeting all your expectations.
Yeah.
And I just love that I've been able to see that. Stacey and I so admire what God's done in you because of your obedience. And I know some of the secret tests, behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
This is behind the sermon, but I've seen the behind the scenes faithfulness and how God's rewarding you. And so when people ask you that question, I know how much of that you can encourage them to just trust the Lord and be faithful.
100%.
So what's something that you didn't share today because this is what happens with me I'll preach a message and then something comes to me in the message that isn't on my notes. Yeah. And then I go, man, if I could re-preach that, I would make that kind of a point.
Yeah, I actually told Alex, I said, hey, there's a couple of verses that I'm going to add. And I was like, you got 5 points. Dude, just preach the 5 points. And
it keeps growing though.
Yeah. It could be, I could talk about enjoying your life all day long.
Yeah.
Because I think it's needed for people. People really do need that permission. Like, wait a second, my life is not this horrible movie. It's like, no, I can enjoy my circumstances. The one thing that I could have added it's in 1 Samuel, and we're in Proverbs, fruit of the Spirit. And I'm like, is this going to be a left turn? Is it going to be a right turn? Which, we have the permission to do, but I'm just like, no, I want to stick with Proverbs. But I have this thing about David, all about avoiding, my point 3 was about avoiding unnecessary pit stops.
Yes.
David goes to the roof.
Yeah.
From there, he commits adultery and commits murder, right?
Yes.
I have a thing around wise environment. Just stay off the roof.
Yeah.
The scripture says, at a time when kings go to war, David stayed home.
Yeah.
There's something powerful about being where you're supposed to be.
I know. You know why? Because tents don't have balconies.
Yeah.
If you're where you're supposed to be, you're not in a position where you can look down on other people and use their vulnerability against them. Yep. He was in the wrong place. Absolutely.
Wrong place. And that's
so. And he didn't enjoy that season.
Yeah. It's like
not in the right way anyway.
Yeah. It's like, I don't even go, oh, if I was on the roof, I would have made a better decision.
Yeah.
It's like, I would, we're talking about the pre-decision, the decision before the decision. Why don't you just not go to the roof?
Right.
So one point was going to be stay off the roof, but all 5 had something to do with like driving.
Yeah.
So I was trying to stick with that theme, and I'll talk about stay off the roof at another time.
But I love staying off the roof. Yeah. That's a word for leaders too.
Yeah.
Because, we look at like David and Bathsheba as it was like an immoral thing, like a sexual thing. But if you remove the sexual part of it, it was simply someone in higher authority using somebody else's vulnerability to their advantage. And how many times do leaders do that? And they don't think of themselves as David meeting Bathsheba, but we shouldn't be on a balcony to begin with. We should be on the battlefield.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So one more thing I want to throw at you is, what do you believe, if you boiled everything from this message down, what do you believe is the number one, if people had just one takeaway, what's the number one obstacle to people really enjoying their life?
Whew. I think the number one obstacle from people enjoying their life is that sometimes their sadness can demand attention from other people. It can be this thing of, the reason I can't enjoy my life is because it's your fault. You did this to me.
Victim, yeah.
And so I can't enjoy my life because this is what my dad did. This is what my ex-husband said. And this is my kids are driving me, like, as if the responsibility is on somebody else. And so I think the biggest hurdle in people's way of enjoying their life is themselves.
Yeah. Because you're right. Because I had this conversation this week with someone. I'm raising, kids that have the same profiles as yours. Some born happy, some not.
Sure.
And in one of those conversations this week, I recognized that the focus and the thought was always, nobody else is making me happy, And I just said, I'm kind of direct in case you didn't know that. I just said, drains collect all of the garbage. When you're the drain, when you're the lowest point energy-wise in the room, everything negative is going to flow to you. First of all, you demand everybody's attention to dig you out of the hole that you're in. But on top of that, when you've decided, I need somebody else to make me happy, to encourage me, you don't know how to encourage yourself, then even what's online is negative drains towards you. And if you want to raise your life, you got to be responsible for the energy you bring into the room. Because I think that takes us back to the story of the 2 spies that saw something very different than the other 10. It was their pre-decision, as you said, their pre-choices to say, I'm going to go into the promised land from a higher perspective because I believe God's going to give me this.
Yeah.
The other 10 went in crawling on their hands and knees. So, of course, everything looked like a giant. But the ones in the trees, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a different report. Yeah. So I think us going, it isn't everybody's responsibility to make me happy.
Yeah.
And even when we get married to people, we get mad at them sometimes. And they can't always be the encouragement. You got to learn, like David, encourage yourself in the Lord. I think that is the greatest point, is take responsibility for your own enjoyment and to really know God wants you to enjoy your life.
Absolutely.
He said we'd have suffering, but he said, take heart. That means be encouraged. I've already overcome the world. So if you'll take on my identity, then you're more than a conqueror. Go into every environment every day with that perspective.
I love it.
And you'll be encouraged.
Absolutely.